Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live Academy, the virtual design learning platform by Middle East Architecture Lab. My name is Riyad Jokka. I'm logging in from Dubai, and I'll be the moderator for this panel today for Trialogues. I'll also be joining in as a panelist. Trialogues is a discussion series which will end with today's session, and it's designed to open up important discussions about the experiences dealing with the current and upcoming challenges due to COVID-19 and its global repercussions. We've curated a roster of 3 leaders in each discussion, each working in a field pertaining to architecture, design, research, and education in different places around the world. So if you've missed the past 2 panels, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch these talks, and we will also record and broadcast this talk eventually on our YouTube. In today's panel, we'll be talking about the lifestyles and spaces of architects under COVID. Our panelists are Stephanie Chaltiel, who is joining from Barcelona. Stephanie is a French architect and interior designer working with innovative techniques in natural materials and offering unique designs for each project. She began her career in Mexico and French Guyana, building by hand with local dwellers' houses. We also have Claudia Pasquero, who's joining from London, who is an architect, curator, author, and educator. Her work and research operates at the intersection of biology, computation, and design. She is the founder and co-director of ECOLOGICStudio in London, and she's a lecturer and director of the Urban Morphogenesis Lab at the Bartlett UCL, professor of architecture, and founder of the Synthetic Landscape Lab at Innsbruck University. My name is Riyad Jokka. I'm based in Dubai. I'm an architect, entrepreneur, and researcher, and I'm the founder of Middle East Architecture Network, or MEAN for short, an innovative architecture practice working at the nexus of design and technology, and a synergetic counterpart, Middle East Architecture Lab, an experimental design research platform through which we are organizing Live Academy and today's session. So for today's panel discussion, we are talking about a subject that is often overlooked, which is the way we deal with crisis through our own pivots in our lives and our careers. And we would like the panelists' perspective on the disruptive influence that COVID-19 have had on their lifestyle and their spaces and their discourse, both in practice and academia. We will start with Stephanie's presentation, followed by Claudia's presentation, and then I'll give also a quick presentation, and then we'll start the Q&A. So Stephanie, can you please share your screen and show us some examples of your work?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Riyad, for the invitation and the presentation. I'm really pleased to see all the people who are there. So I'm the founder of Med Architects, based mostly in Barcelona. We've been developing some technologies related to shotcrete, but made with drones and using fabric formwork. So the aim of what we're doing is to bring out the digital fabrication and the advanced technologies out of the lab and out of the more elitist, let's say, environment, and to bring it for more kind of down to earth and practical reasons. So I'm going to share from here. I'm going to show you the kind of last projects we've been developing that are actually quite linked to architecture of emergency or temporary architectures, as really some of our first projects using the drone spray were related to build some emergency shelters. So 5 slides. We have first using all architectural envelopes. That is what we are aiming to do with the drone spray technique that we are developing and the light textile formwork. So that all the parts of the building can be used, for example, the roof as a garden and the vertical gardens on the facade, and how to make this, how to think about those principles a bit more out of the box. Secondly, we will see design and build the non-permanent or even for emergency architectures. The little image that you see in movement is from Milan Design Week last year, where we built in 4 days, thanks to AKT2, Samam Engineering, Kanya Viva, so a big multidisciplinary team, where we highlighted that we could build in a few days some large shell structures with those principles. Then we will move on to soft, movable, and as well for kids architecture, where I will present a project I did together with Jane Scott, who manufactured it for the London Design Festival last year in King's Cross. Then we will move on to architecture that grows. So we're really focused. The past months, we've been extensively working with vertical gardens with textile support to ground it. So the image you see is from Svenja Kuhn, who is a designer. She's German, but she's based in Sweden. And we are starting a collaboration together on those vertical gardens. And finally, I will show you what have as well occupied most of our time at MedArchitects. That is digital fabrication for brought to people's everyday life in their houses, because we had a lot of orders as well linked to the crisis, to the COVID crisis, where people want to invest a bit more in their housing. So this is a work in progress, is a draft, has never been seen before. So it's exclusivity for you. We're working on a new project where we're starting to introduce the idea of using all the parts of the building, but not only for really, expensive buildings. Of course, there are the examples in Copenhagen of the roof that is used as a slope and everything. But the idea that we are trying to develop and the technologies that we're putting together as well, thanks to our collaboration with Centrale Lille in France, is really to use those shotcrete techniques and those drone spray principles out there for in the construction market. That is a bit more. And when we started building those prototypes and using drone spray, in reality, the builders were the most interested. We had half of the academic crowd divided, and then we had really the builders and people developing, spray machine, and people who actually there building on site who are really like, I want to use this. So anyway, we will probably see a bit more of that project later. This is the example of the Milan Design Week that we did with Isola Design District, commissioned by Regione Lombardia, so by the politics, where we showcased in here that we could build very fast. So there was a collaboration with Cagna Viva, and thanks to the engineers, we came up with a fast solution and a clever assembly of the different bamboo arches, even though they were so thin, so that they could support all the weight of the mud and they could be assembled very quickly on site in the very center of Milan. So with the idea of using, we do feel at MedArchitects that really people are really so shy still in terms of building the non-permanent. It feels like really building a construction that won't last is always the same, either an inflatable, either containers, but it feels like there are so many possibilities with digital fabrication and using local materials that are not quite exploited yet, and that we are particularly interested to investigate. So here as well is a product that we are working on extensively at the moment. So on the right, the images you see is what we've done with Jane Scott. She's the one who manufactured it, following the principles that we've been developing as well through the previous fabric formwork projects. And on the left, you see the new model that is a scaled down model 1 to 5. That is a 3D knit pergola that we are about to launch in the market, again with the idea of bringing digital technologies and in this case industrial knitting fitted with inflatable arches for a large crowd. So what I started to introduce at the beginning is our new collaboration with Svenja Kuhn, who has been developing herself those fabric where the vegetation can directly grow as a support without even the pockets. And we are working on adapting the drone spray technology that we have for shotcreting into vertical gardens, because one of the limitations or what makes a vertical garden as well expensive is because of the drainage and the watering system and the bringing the right nutrients to each vegetation. So we're kind of applying principles of precision agriculture, but at the urban scale and vertically. So this is what you will be seeing us doing in the coming months and years. And then finally, I just wanted to share with you that we had since the lockdown, since the coronavirus crisis, we had a lot of orders of furniture, of pieces of architecture that can fit directly into people's environments, into their houses. And we notice that people are kind of want to get out of the IKEA. And we do feel that there's so much opportunity with digital fabrication that can be brought back into people's, more the common, the mundane, everyday life. So hopefully I can share this with you in next talks. That's it. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for this incredible insight. I mean, I'm familiar with the work, but it's really great to see the plans ahead and also to see it in retrospect from your standpoint. Let's move on to Claudia's presentation.
Thank you for the invitation. So when I've been invited and I saw the brief, I thought I would prepare a presentation that rather than being about my project, we'll try and address the brief. Let's say in two ways. On one way, by showing project that we have developed during the lockdown, which is already a controversial question because 2020 was supposed to be, was starting as a very good year. We signed 5 very large projects, of which 4 are on hold at the moment. And 1, I cannot show it. So already my first task was quite challenging, but there are other project that emerged that we developed either in research or in our daily life during the lockdown. Well, the first one is that I completed my PhD in November, a practice-based PhD that connects my research to my practice, which is titled Polycephalum, which is the microorganism that you see here, aesthetic as a measure of ecological intelligence in architecture and urban design. This speculate on how aesthetic and visual language could become a way of discussing ecological, political, and why not, social and pandemic issues. This was completed in November, but due to the pandemic and the lockdown award now. The other things we had long conversation about during the lockdown is the future of the Venice Biennale. We were invited by the curator in the main space. The title very much connects to the title of the conversation today because it was how we will live together. So as part of my presentation, I will show some very small projects that developed during this time, and I will read a text I've been writing reflecting on how we will live together and taps on my research and practice. So I'm reporting here from ecoLogicStudio. Here you see a photo of the studio taken from the window that is here. So let's imagine an expanded notion of the we to include alongside humans, multiple human beings, the plethora of complex synthetic organisms currently inhabiting what in ecoLogicStudio we define the urban sphere. These include molds, like you see here, algorithms. And here we see a project, is a research project we are developing with the United Nations Development Program. It is about regreening city by using biological and artificial intelligence. So this is a master plan for Guatemala City. Rethinking the way we see blue-green planning, not as a set of 10, 12 green corridor and canals, but as a million of them distributed in the city accordingly to data that we can harvest through the satellite and other monitoring systems. So let's imagine how this form of artificial and biological intelligence can become bio-citizen, actively involved in the formation and transformation of the urban landscape. From this perspective, the design that we develop in ecoLogicStudio, in my practice, but also in the lab in UCL and in Innsbruck, is the exploration of our collective sensibility. That is our ability of recognizing emergent patterns of reasoning across species, materialities, and technological regime. You see here a bit of Ortus XL was originally commissioned by the Centre Pompidou in Paris, then traveled to Vienna to the MAC, is currently, let's say, a little bit stuck in the Mori Museum in Tokyo. And here is a view of Ortus with Tokyo on the background. And the reason why I say about stimulating our collective sensibility or reading pattern is that many of our projects involve microalgae. Microalgae are very resilient organisms that proliferate and are able to grow by eating and consuming some of the pollutants, some of the bioproducts of the urban sphere. So the idea is not to use microalgae, but effectively to establish an alliances with them. How through architecture, how through material language, we can establish an alliances with microalgae so that they actually remetabolize some of the elements that we call pollutants, but pollutants are not, are just elements like CO2, PM5, PM2.5, NOx, elements that we cannot breed or consume, but algae can and thrive on them. So, well, in particular, you also explore how through morphological articulation and a 3D printed substratum, we can establish the relationship with microalgae and interact with the pollutant presence in our city. So, in this sense, architectural aesthetic is no longer inspired by biology or computer science. It actually contributes to the actualization of their disciplinary discourse within a reimagined spatial reality. Architecture acquires its own transdisciplinary intelligence and self-visibility, which can train and cultivate. In our current design practice, we deploy this sensibility to access the human dimension of the we, as we have defined it. So this element of collaboration with the microalgae, and to enrich our perception of it. This shift has the power to expand the space of design solution. We can conceive by reproblematizing given problem. Urban air pollution and water pollution, for example, can become nutrients, fertilizer, and be remetabolized by hungry colonies of cyanide bacteria. This can change our daily practice in the loose term. We can grow biomass for synthetic digestion into photobioreactor. Even before providing solution for the current pandemic or else, we think the fundamental societal role of design is to ask new questions about the known problems of the urban sphere we all inhabit. And I conclude here. Thank you.
Claudia, that was a really incredible presentation, and really nice to see you addressing these issues and to see some of the new projects, because I haven't seen a presentation by you in a while, since Milan 3 years ago maybe. So clearly there has been a lot of development in what you guys are doing, and I'm sorry to hear about the projects that got put on hold, but we are experiencing a similar problem, and I'll share my screen at this point. So as I've mentioned to our attendees and to the panelists, we are leading two kind of synergetic platforms here, Middle East Architecture Network, which is our, so to speak, architectural practice, and Middle East Architecture Lab, which is kind of makeshift research repository that we've started over the past 5 years. And I'll show you how both are working together in sync in a way. So would mean one of the projects that were put on hold is this project that we started with Abu Dhabi Municipality. So this is one of 3 that got put on hold this year within a span of 1 week. I could show this project because, sadly, it might not go through. But the idea here was that I found it to be an interesting sort of use of 3D printing. Abu Dhabi Municipality was investigating the typology of the Majlis, which is a traditional seating area, almost like a living room that is traditionally meant for guests. So they wanted to envision this typology as an annex to a housing project that they're working on there. And they wanted us to look at options of how we can use the sort of the possibilities that could come out of 3D printing and concrete to look at this typology. So we are working across different scales. This is a competition entry we did for a modular museum here in Sharjah in the UAE. And this is the office where I am at right now, our virtual office, where I've been presenting and moderating a live academy for the past 14 sessions. This would be the 15th. So in this space, what we've done is basically we've used some of the experience we've had with Middle East Architecture Lab, organizing workshops for the past 5 years. And before starting my company here in Dubai 2 years ago, we've designed this hypothetical space open to subscriptions and memberships, and that would basically provide access to robotics and innovative technologies and design, and offer that to students and professionals to participate on a membership basis. Sadly, we've opened this for investment, but the project has never gone through. We were very close to getting that investment, but we still think of it as the ideal project to represent what we do with Meal and Mean, both as an entrepreneurial project and also as a project decentralizing access to these new technologies and bringing people together to do their projects, to do their experiments, and to also watch and learn from others. This is a project we did in Wadi Rum, also with Panelists 3D printing. We worked on this with AI Build. And this is a project we got to build last year, and photo credit goes to Naro. The idea here is that we used 30,000 recycled water bottles to 3D print these parts that were shipped from London. And this is exactly the problem that we're facing here in Dubai, is that these technologies are slowly being introduced. There's a high demand of investigating these new building techniques, but there's not enough resources that we can use. Now, the concrete base was 3D printed in Dubai, and I thought the logistical challenges that we faced were a great learning experience. But as well, the kind of ecological approach to the project was, for me, quite interesting, working with our partners AI Build and Reflow out of the Netherlands. This is a project we designed for Expo. This is a project we did for Audi as an innovation hub, also bringing people together to watch presentations. My colleague who is watching right now, Manuel Jimenez, gave a presentation here about Nagami. He was with us on a Trialogue a few days ago, and kindly also offered 30 Nagami 3D printed chairs, which you can see here in the background, for the attendees to sit and watch the presentations. So that was a really beautiful moment of collaboration. Now, something to note is that the cladding material, this black material at the surface of the exterior, was made from recycled rubber tires. In this case, it's a bespoke material where they crush the rubber tires, which are extremely harmful to the environment if you think of discarding them in a landfill or burning them. In this case, they're recycled and upcycled into a cladding material. Traditionally, the factory that we work with used these for racetracks, etc. But here we kind of thought of them as a cladding material for the exterior of this pavilion. This is a proposal we did with Dubai Municipality for a 3D printed bus stop shed. And again, this range of scale goes to products. We're developing this lamp, which started off as a wedding gift to my sister. And we developed this script that we wrote to sort of manipulate almost like pottery, these forms for the lamp. And now we have a lamp that we could produce in a very short period of time and at a very low cost for 3D printing. And we're putting it out in the market soon. Another project that picked up right after the COVID crisis has ended. Now with Meal, we've taken that opportunity or the challenge, and we turned it into an opportunity. And we've started a new program, which is Live Academy. And everyone joining us today is joining under the umbrella of that program. So thanks again to our attendees. We've had such a colorful set of people joining together and sharing and exchanging their ideas and their knowledge. And in a way, it became this platform that decentralizes this access, which is an idea that I'm very interested in. Myself, I had the opportunity to go to a great school of architecture where you have this innovation all around you. I went to the AA, and as we can see here from my colleagues, we all have had the sort of advantage to get access to that research and to progress it and to advance it in a way in our different locales. But I also understand that this is not the case with a lot of people, especially here in the Middle East, where that access is kind of limited. So we've also been actively working with larger offices like Parsons to give workshops, for example, through Meal, about digital fabrication, computation, parametric design. We've also collaborated with Apple to have a residency over the period of 1 month last year, where we designed on an iPad some small scale 3D models that we then were showing the participants how to exhibit them in AR using Apple hardware, which is something that a lot of people have access to these days. And Neil started as a project as a node of the AA. So I've been directing a visiting school Dubai here for the past 5 years. And these are some examples of what we've done, also ranging in scale up to exhibition here, a one-to-one structure that is a membrane. And, the most fulfilling moment of these programs is when you see lots of people from different places coming together and learning and, sending that message and coming back again. So again, this is kind of my note on, the how we use the situation to our advantage to come up with something new. So just a note about Live Academy, we have 2 upcoming spin-offs. So we're already organizing semester 2, where we have 4 incredible lecturers joining us and sharing their wealth of knowledge, as well as 8 classes in different software at an intermediate level. So I strongly urge you to look at that once we launch the program in a couple of weeks. We've also been developing a website where we're putting an archive of all these classes over, 200 hours of footage that we've had on Zoom in the past month. We're putting all of that on, a cloud system where you can access it and, again, continuing that project and it will hopefully become a project that we work on the side for a long time. So that's that about me, and I'm sorry if I took too long, but again, it was kind of an unplanned situation. Maybe we can start now with the questions to our panelists. So starting with the first question, and it's directed to Stephanie and Claudia. So we've seen from the examples of the work that you've showed us, and obviously the work is out there, that you've integrated materiality and new technologies, and also you've always thought of our relationship to nature, certain ecological issues, as well as cultural and behavioral parameters in your work. How did the disruption of COVID-19 influence that thinking in a way? Did you start thinking about your projects in a different light after the situation, or did you start thinking of new ideas to come up with after this sort of shocking, disruptive event has influenced your life?
Should I start?
Yeah, maybe you can start, Stephanie, because you started first. We'll repeat the cycle.
Okay. What the different topics that we've been working on for the past few years really are a lot about using local materials. So in that regard, in the crisis, we couldn't bring things from France to Spain, or even very border countries couldn't exchange goods or services. So in that regard, we were already kind of working towards a direction about the very local. And then the idea of using drones as well, and robotics acting in general for fabrication, they can be, of course, controlled remotely. So it means that a lot of the construction that was stopped or even cancelled, us too, we did have some a huge project of 8,000 meters squares of paint with a drone cancelled because of the crisis. But anyway, so a lot of the construction that was stopped during the pandemic as well bring to think about methods of construction where you don't need to be on site. And this is as well what we are particularly developing with Central Lille in terms of artificial intelligence that is embarked on board into the drone. So basically we have a system where we have the 3D trajectories And then those 3D trajectories have attributes. So for example, you have half of trajectory A that I need the drone to go velocity 1. And the other bit of that trajectory A needs to go velocity B. So, this kind of logics that already exist in other disciplines than architecture, that are well developed in other disciplines, but are not yet used in architecture, could be very relevant in terms of pandemic or in terms of crisis as we are experiencing, because people don't necessarily need to go on site.
Mm-hmm. 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 Claudia, how did that affect your work? You've shown a picture which you didn't expand on too much, and I'm really interested to know more about that project, which is it's almost like a refinement apparatus, like almost like an extraction method for something. Can you expand on that project?
Yeah, is in my list in the answer. I was just thinking now. Yeah, this is the biobombola. So, the crisis, of course, being quite a strong event, made us reflect, as everybody did. A few things happened, as you pointed out, in academia. We all discovered that we can be much more structured in having remote type of both conference and seminar, and that I think it's a contribution that we will bring forward. Of course, we will not always be online. We will go back to meet in person, but there is a degree of structuring online event that I think it's really relevant. It can connect people across the planet without the need of flying and, impacting on traveling. And that is something that definitely, in my opinion, will remain. There has been a project that we are working on. We have different type of, since the last time we met, we had done a few projects. We worked mainly on facade. We had the first permanent project in Astana Expo, and we developed different type of photobioreactor. The glass one that you pointed out is one that was very much discussed in the period of the lockdown. Both with a client with which we are developing a playground for kids. And the client before, this playground was supposed to clean the air, but now the focus is like which kind of microalgae we can use to allow kids to actually breathe better. And developing breathing issues. And then our own environment in the studio, we started to also harvest our own spirulina and effectively consume it. So the biobombola that you see is a form of microgarden that cultivate spirulina and other type of microalgae. There are also red, blue algae that we are cultivating. Mm-hmm. And that you can cultivate in a small environment, in a home environment, and therefore start to produce your own protein. So it contributes to remetabolizing air pollution, but is also much more efficient in producing protein than many other plants, because a teaspoon of spirulina is equivalent of a T-bone stack in terms of protein. So in a moment in which the breeding on animal become problematic, then it can change the way we contribute to the planet, also in a collective manner. So he shifted the attention from saying, okay, we build the facade to we build micro unit that can be distributed and therefore contribute to the ecology of the planet, but also contribute to change our daily practice. That's, I think, are some of the thoughts that you mentioned.
Claudia, can you tell us a bit more about spirulina? Maybe some of the audience might not know what spirulina is.
Okay, we didn't invent algae farming, but we started to work with microalgae many years ago, let's say 2006, for the London Biennale. We did the first prototype. There are scientists and algae farmers working with microalgae because they are a source of protein, but there's many other properties that are about production of energy, production of food, and cleaning of the air. What we propose is the integration through design and through aesthetic of biotechnology in the built environment. So it's effectively what we call design innovation. So it's design, but integrate an innovation into the design, and we use design as a way of creating a communication with the end user. So it's not a technology that is far away and we just consume the product. It's a technology that through design we can interact with in our daily life. And there can be many bioproducts. In particular, the biobombola is about the production of food. The project we did in Astana was more about the production of energy. Photosynthetica venture that is about facade, is about clean air. So there are different ways you can integrate. But in that way, somehow the building becomes alive as it changes all the time. It becomes a question not of construction, but of what I call cyber gardening.
Very interesting.
For example, these that you see on the back, it's the metabolization of biomass from microalgae into a form of biolayer. This was developed in the Bartlett, I think, 5 years ago.
So
and
this is a completely natural material.
Yeah, it's grown.
And it's decomposable. It's basically...
It's totally grown. Yeah. It's the larger bit we have been growing for now, because the biotechnology of the microalgae is scalable now. We can apply it to facade, to the architectural scale. Other type of biotechnology, like the one you see here, or growing material, at the moment is still not scalable.
Mm-hmm. Stephanie, have you been teaching and working from home primarily, and how did that affect your sort of workflows in a way? Did you find, for example, doing meetings, because your work is very hands-on and you kind of almost need to be in a warehouse or a fabrication lab or even outside to work on the experiments that you've been coming up with. So did you find that the past few months have been challenging, or did you find that there was a way to maybe think about the work in a different sort of aspect, maybe working with people over the cloud or collaborating with people that are not in your immediate vicinity in Barcelona? How did you overcome the challenge of this past few months where we had to work from home?
Yeah, actually we were kind of prepared in a sense that we bought a house that is in the outskirts of Barcelona, and it's really big. It's got like a lot of outdoor space on purpose. There was a plan 4 years ago to buy it so that really we can make it as a workshop. So I'm very used to work in my backyard and to invite people who are collaborating with us. I'm a really strong believer of small experiments that start from home, and that of course need to develop slowly. And then at some point we do need the labs, but already there's so much work that can be done with things you can order online with a minimum of space. To give you an example, the first mud shell we built with a drone spray technology in South Bank in London for Design Junction in 2018. The students that were supposed to work with us on this for insurance reason dropped out. So we were left by building 2,000 of those little bags. So that was for people who are joining us. It was a dome that was a geodesic frame fitted with 2,000 little bags of hay, then sprayed with a drone. So we ended up in a tiny Airbnb, me and my collaborators met, doing this in a tiny space in an Airbnb in Chelsea, in London. And we managed. So what I mean is we actually, I don't think we need necessarily really advanced labs to do interesting experiments. And even with a prefabrication, you can really do a lot. And then, of course, the crisis has meant that some of our projects have been delayed. Especially that we were actively developing the IE, the drone spray that is automated, and this comes from Lille. So our lab is really with Central Lille, our collaborators, and this, of course, I would say it's slowed down because we do need to be on site. Of course, there's all the programmation and the before going on site that we could continue. But the pandemic has slowed down that process. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Claudia, did you have any issues with reaching out to your students at the Bartlett over Zoom or?
Well, mainly my change is that I used to fly 3-4 times every week, and I didn't. So that is the main change. And then, of course, access in the Bartlett and access in the lab I have in Innsbruck. In Innsbruck, I have a quite big lab that goes from 3D printing to biology. So it's got part of 3D printing, but then it's got biological printing, microscope, and all the rest. Here we have a little bit of a setup. So we expanded also on sensor. We bought a lot of sensor. Here you see one experiment. And and we have other things there. So we have sensor and smaller 3D printed also in the studio in London. So we kept coming here and working from here, and actually traveling between two places, being quite healthy across the park. And we have our tool, and we focus on certain aspects that could be done here. But for example, if the Biennale, as they were making the hypothesis at a certain point would have been on August, it would have been very difficult to realize it, because then I would have need to access the lab in Innsbruck, and that was not possible. But there are elements that we could continue to develop here in London.
Mm-hmm. So that apparatus that you just showed us, can you explain to us the process? What do you give it as raw material? What does it extract? What is the process exactly?
Here I have two. I have one which is more technical, and it's got different sensor embedded into it from which you can retrieve data, and the other which is the home version. Actually, here I don't have the home version. I have it at home. So, and another one that cultivate another type of alga, Porphyridium, which is a red alga. So basically, it's got a specific morphology that allow the algae to grow. They've been and flow and not to get stuck to the glass. The glass is a light graded glass, and basically the algae get cultivated there and the air from outside get pumped inside, and so they get denser and denser and denser, and then every 3 days, every week, every 2 weeks, depends what you want to do, you can harvest them with this.
Oh, nice.
Don't make me do the harvest live. We also 3D printed all the kit, because it was easier to 3D print everything than actually go and buy it at the moment. And also because everything fit perfectly.
Yeah.
So we also we even 3D printed the funnel. So we harvest with this kit that is the same one you see on the photos. And we 3D printed a little valve through which you can harvest the water. The spirulina are bacteria, so there are little elements that get stuck on the surface.
Amazing. My next question was about your work from home setup. So I'll start by answering that question. At the beginning of the COVID-19 situation, I remember March 15th, we handed over a project to Expo, which definitely got on hold, Expo 2020, which was supposed to happen in Dubai here this year. Claudia, you're smiling. We've been in touch about that recently, or maybe a few years back. But beginning of this year, first we didn't hear from our client, and then we heard the news that Expo will be postponed to next year, which obviously is I think the reasonable thing to do. But at the same time, it put that project, which we've started the year with very optimistically after a few proposals to Expo, it put that project on hold, which is kind of a bummer for our office, to be honest. So 15th of March was the deadline, and 16th of March was the lockdown when it started. So we were trying to scramble everything together and make sense of what's going on, and trying to find a plan to move forward. And my first reaction was to bring that project that I showed at the beginning of my presentation back, and to try to develop it a little bit more based on the client's feedback, and to have something to show them after the situation was over. Obviously, eventually we got very busy with Live Academy, but my setup, my space is very important for me. And we have a really nice space that we've invested a lot of time in putting together and developing and buying equipment for. So we have our 3D printers, and it's in this industrial area in a shipping container. A few weeks ago, Stephanie and I were interviewed, and also Claudia. The three of us were interviewed by Naro and they asked to basically show the office in a way. I'm really happy to work there. And
I was on the other side of the office in that place.
So for me to shift to a work from home scenario was completely strange. So the first thing we did was we moved all of our computers to our homes, and then we started to try to create a routine where we'd meet in the morning, the team and I, and we'd start discussing a list of things that we could do in that day. And we almost started at the beginning making up our own work for ourselves. So like, we were like, okay, today we're going to have this task list, and it will be stuff we don't want to deal with once we get busy. And then eventually it turned into a project that we kind of made for ourselves, which is Live Academy. So did you find the sort of that shift from working in an office to working from home? I mean, obviously, Claudia, you showed that in my previous question, that you and also Stephanie addressed it in her backyard experiments. We all seem to have made it work one way or another. But do we miss working from the office? Because right now I'm kind of in denial and I don't want to go back to the office. What do you think, Stephanie?
Well, I think it shows that we can be much more flexible, all of us really, in terms of, the setting where we can work. We don't necessarily need to have the office full time. We don't necessarily need to have everybody who is there every day. Perhaps some of the days, it's better to be working from another lab or do some small experiments from home. I think it would be interesting if really things could be a bit more flexible. I mean, as well, I think it's important to say as well, when you have children, I think it's quite, I have really young children, and I think it's interesting to know that, you can as well do a lot of meetings online. And I think before the pandemic, people were much more reluctant. Seriously, I mean, in environments where I used to teach and everything, it was even hard to get just a phone call to if I wasn't going there physically. And I think the pandemic really, as Claudia have said, and hopefully it kind of remains after the crisis, that we can be much more inclusive and get like people from all over the world without so much spending and so much, coordination. This is a big deal when you have kids to travel, to New York and so on. For example, before the pandemic, I was supposed to exhibit in Milan again for the Isola Design District. I was supposed to go to New York, maybe you as well, Riyadh, for Design Pavilion, was it? And yeah, so it was kind of a huge organization that we put it together already. Yeah. And it was I have to say, I mean, if I'm really honest, it was kind of a relief that actually we could just continue working on the project, taking our time, not need to do all that traveling, all that crazy organization, and kind of have a bit more time to reflect. So I think really there's loads to be found in terms of ways of working that have remained extremely traditional, in my view, as well for architects. Like there's no flexibility whatsoever. There's no kind of temporary childcare in different cities. In Europe, for example, is like, you need to register for the whole year. People are not so open as well about, you coming with kids, for example, to meetings. Apart in Copenhagen, that will always remember, the director of KDK, who is Nathalie Mossin, who is an incredible woman. I went with my young son at the time. I was 6 months old, and I was part of that. InnoChain is a European network of funding for developing new technologies in the construction chain. And, she was telling everybody, like, it doesn't matter if you hear a little bit of noise in the background. And it's kind of everyone then started to accept that was my son. Just all this to say that I really think there's a lot to be found in terms of flexibility of the workspace.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Claudia, can you tell us your reflections on that? Did you plan to go back to the office at a certain date, or do you have new ideas to implement in your office post this crisis?
Well, as I said, my office is more of a plane. So the question is that what is going to happen later when we start to travel again? I cannot say that I was happy of the lockdown. Really, I was not. I was traumatized, I think, for a week. And actually, yes, I was at home for a week because I had such a terrible reaction to the fact that all the project stopped, that I think the virus didn't even want to see me. I mean, could not even, because I was totally furious. But, yeah, I cannot say that I was happy about that. That cannot be actually sincerely said. But on the other hand, I agree with the fact that I don't know when things will start again. They cannot go back to where they were in the same way. There was a little bit of a hyper activity, and you will fly for just an half an hour meeting half of the planet and then come back. That maybe certain things now can be implemented differently. Having said that, we cannot be just online all the time. But I think there will be some restructuring into that. It's something that every crisis brings. And I start to feel like the generation crisis because, I go out of university, the Twin Tower go down, and I start to structure things, and I got new research and new project, and there is the economical crisis of 2008. Finally, you recover from that, and the virus arrived. Like, okay.
Well,
basically, of course, in all of these crises, I saw it also in 2008. There is a level of consistency or trying to be more consistent after that emerged. But I hope there will be also something else because I'm a little bit deep of being in the generation crisis. So I would want that as this happens, we can really take the chance to reframe the way we in the planet work so that it can become more ecological and sustainable in many levels. But that is problematic in a way because unfortunately the rhetoric that many clients have at the moment is that the budget is being cut. But that's not the rhetoric we should have, because we should actually challenge the way we've been living until now that brought to the crisis, because it's consumerism that brought to the crisis and to the virus. And is the fact that high level of consumption of certain type of product became normal because of the wealth of our population. So I think we should seriously try to, as designer, reframe and propose a brave project that change this structure.
Mm-hmm. On that note, you've worked on a few projects that aim to improve the air quality of a certain space, or aim to interact with the space positively through the use of these microorganisms that you're working with, and in juxtaposition to these beautiful structures that are digitally fabricated and digitally simulated. So that combination, could that be used in a way? Did you have any ideas on your sketchbook during COVID of how that could correspond to certain restrictions in space or certain contributions to the purification of air or so on? Because we've been seeing a lot of rules and laws of how public spaces should be, kind of dealt with during and after lockdown. Did you have any ideas of how to?
We are talking with one of the clients to transform the curtain in bioplastic in a way to reorganize commercial spaces as pocket. But essentially, what I hope it will change. I mean, this is from the more architectural spatial term, and then there is this project of the playground to clean the air. There are, of course, our project that tackle directly this subject, but especially tackle directly our relationship with the wilderness, which I think we should reframe. And that's why I think, for example, too, like you have been discussed of 3D printing or integrating biological element into construction or interacting with the construction and architecture in a different way, I think are important because they can reframe our relationship with objects from pure consumer to people that redesign the processes. For me, this is really important. Then there are solutions that, of course, we are discussing with our clients to to bring this as an immediate response, and that is happened to everybody, I guess, because of the current situation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very interesting. What about you, Stephanie? Your structures, your sort of mud structures, and the way you're using drones. For me, even maybe a bit more flexible kind of response to my question, because you're behind the structures. You're inventing new ways of making things, and you're innovating in certain technologies that have been around but not have been used in the way that you're using them. Do you see yourself designing, and maybe the product that you said will be put out on the market as a sort of deployable structure or a tent? Do you see yourself contributing to certain spatial measures that have to be dealt with now to organize and design effectively public spaces? Can you use your ideas to contribute to that in a way, from these deployable structures to the construction methodologies and techniques? Did you have any ideas on your sketchbook of how you can respond to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think during the pandemic as well, especially in cities, in density centers, I think a lot of people have really sensed the need for nature. And like immediate nature. Of course, like during the pandemic, we couldn't even take the car and go to the countryside. So really what we've been developing for the past year, let's say, it's about having the vertical gardens that can be done at an affordable price and can be manicured over time thanks to the drone spray of precise nutrients and water. I feel is really relevant for the coming years. And especially as well in the context of the pandemic, where people really need the nature in cities. Then again, I think it has brought to the attention of a very general public the idea of healthy living, to feel all that drama that is happening at our doorstep. I feel people really want to be reinsured with healthy materials. They kind of even people who are not designers or architects or have no idea about all this, they do feel that they want their walls to be nice to touch and that they can breathe nicely at home. And in that regard, I feel like unbaked material like the ones we are using from Earth architecture, but revisited for our time and put in place with methodologies and technologies like the drone spray that helps with the laborious tasks and therefore makes it more affordable and more possible to be built. I feel that as well very relevant for the society we are living in at the moment, that is post-pandemic. And as we know, we all kind of expecting if there's going to be a second wave, is it going to be a pandemic once every year? Absolutely no one knows those things. And it feels like, the new normality, the donut economy, all those like terms that we hear a lot that really is related to which kind of materials are we going to use and how people are going to inhabit those spaces. Then I just wanted to say about the 3D knit pergola that we are aiming to launch very soon. Of course, this kind of a soft architecture deployable in minutes could be as well an interesting response to social distance, but that is made not with, like the mask and the cage and kind of in a softer way, a bit more kind of soft transition in between people as well, as opposed to have proper, separation. Knit is just like a pullover, like a clothing. So it's obviously, in my view, a nicer separation than more aggressive materials such as plexiglass or what the masks are made of.
You showed some examples of that, or some examples of your experiments during your interview with Naru about a week ago or so. Do you still kind of work on some of these prototypes at home?
No, so they are prototyped in the industry, in the factory in Barcelona. Right. We are working with a local manufacturer, but then we send to each other. They send the prototypes. I send it back with some modification, and we just work by sending each other the physical model.
Very interesting. And your material of choice is fabric, so it's very easy to move around and
Exactly.
work with. At this point, maybe we'll start by some questions from the attendees. So if you can think of a question, you could either post it in the chat, or if you'd like, we can also show you on camera and you can ask a question on camera. So please raise your hand on camera to address that, or you can also address your question in the chat and I can read it out to the panelists. And while we wait for these questions to come in, my last question had been asked to all the panelists before in these 3 past panels, or the 2 past panels before this one being the third, which is, Claudia, what are 3 words that describe the future for you?
Usually I would answer polycephalon.
Okay, so that's one. And what is that? I mean, can you tell us?
The future is mutant and collective, like the polycephalon.
Mutant?
But for me, is a question of how design can have a different role. So as I say in the polycephalon thesis, and we are also now writing a new book that intersect my work and the one of Marco, is that, like, for me, is how visual languages can be taken more seriously, and to try and understand how visual language can really have a political and ecological impact, in my opinion. And therefore, design not be something that make a biotechnology pretty, but actually something that revolutionize the way biotechnology and innovation is integrated in our daily lives.
Interesting. What about you, Stephanie? What are 3 words that you can kind of sum up your ideas of what the future could be?
Well, definitely light. We're really working on lightness with the fabric formwork, with a drone that is light to carry lots of material. The lightness as well in the way the company emerges, how does it work? That we work as a network of people, that we are always working with the same specialists. The drone team is the same for years. And they're really involved in the kind of architectures and the new architectures that we're doing with those technologies. So light for the lightness, then green, not only for the vertical gardens or the vertical architectural or the green architectural envelopes, but as well green in which kind of materials we are using, where are they coming from? Even if, as I was telling Marcella from Naro, even if you build local, if you build, like for Milan, we use byproduct the rice husk and the local clay, and we cut the bamboos ourselves in the local forest, but it's still very hard to bring in the city. So how do you make actually local efficient? How do you make it local, very local? So it is really about the boundaries and the way the city centers work, so that local materials can really be part of what we're actually constructing with those local materials. And then the third one, probably flexibility.
Flexibility. Yeah. Very interesting. I think my 3 words would be the future, hopefully, will be optimistic, collaborative, and decentralized. And for obvious reasons that I've listed in my presentation. But I'd like to give some more room for the audience to participate a little bit. And we've had a quiet audience so far. So if anybody could think of a question to post in the chat, now is the chance to have your voice heard. And maybe, host, we can unmute Jad to start by asking his question.
Hello, just lovely presentation from all the panelists. And I think my question would be for Stephanie and Claudia about the AI. And specifically, it's like, where do you see this kind of moving forward in the sense of, in Claudia's example, having the yellow mold that has a specific emergence quality? Do you see that just being a visual language that starts to structure the AI, and then later on can actually have its own sort of character, or does it sort of still possess this biological sort of characteristics? And for Stephanie's case, would it be the sort of would there be this opportunity for machine learning where this tool becomes an entity, or would it still need this sort of collaborative process between the designer, the construction, and the machine itself?
Well, for us, there are 2 ways in which at the moment we are approaching artificial intelligence. The one I briefly mentioned in today's presentation is the one we are applying in the deep green, in which we train GAN algorithm through biological intelligence. So through SlideMold, we work with SlideMold and Stefano to redesign network of distribution of resources in city, because that's what the algorithm of the SlideMold can effectively do. And this bottom-up and collective. So the idea is to transfer the logic of the SlideMold to a GAN algorithm and then use it as a way to reframe the green-blue network in the city. So interfacing the intelligence of SlideMold with data from satellite and train algorithms to redesign larger territory. We've been applying that to Aarhus, Tallinn, Guatemala City, Vranje, Serbia, and Mogadishu, and now we're discussing with UNDP to develop a new phase of the project for November. The other way we are approaching that is also pattern recognition in the case of the growth of the microalgae. So some of the kit with microalgae integrate sensor for cultivation. Some of the larger algae farm, for example, have a whole monitoring system. But there could be also visual recognition of the growth. So how pattern become really, and visual language become really part of the language, and therefore use artificial intelligence to participate in this form of cyber gardening. For the moment, the system that we have installed in Astana is more of a system with sensor and actuation, but we are developing also systems that develop artificial intelligence algorithm mainly with visual recognition. So these are the two ways we've been working with that. And on the philosophical level is, of course, to try and expand the knowledge that we have now on the biological level with the artificial and biological intelligence and interaction with our intelligence. So to redefine the way we design as a form of collaboration.
Interesting. Stephanie, do you want to address the same question?
Yeah, no, I do find that the question is very interesting. In our case, we're particularly focused on developing the artificial intelligence in the drone spray technique. It starts with very simple considerations. At first, we do need for legislation because of the safety. So far we kind of went, we're a bit in denial of the rules, and we kind of passed even in city centers. But now that we really want to be able to apply the technology in normal construction sites, we need to really comply with those laws, and they are malleable laws because they are new. Those tools are new, and therefore people who are at deviation laws are happy to discuss usually. So artificial intelligence is first and before everything for us, the detection of a danger and emergency landing. So the sensors that can sense the obstacle, the minimum distance in between different drones, and if they are working collectively, the distance to the surface that we want to quote, or to the vertical garden we want to send the nutrients onto. Then is really to improve the technology and the resulting architectures that we can get at the moment. So one aspect is to have a variable thickness that we are particularly interested in, especially in facade, but as well in shell structures, where it is more efficient to have a variable thickness. And for this, we have the GPS that is on the floor, and then we have a leader that is turning 360 degrees constantly, that is embarked on the drone together with a mini computer. And here we're able to actually monitor how many layers. Basically, the drone continues spraying in loops until it reaches the thickness that we have set for this area. And it does for each of the area that we have set. And then finally, that's a cracks recognition that is well developed for concrete construction, for surveying. This is really used very normally already. So this is really a machine learning where the machine trains itself to recognize the cracks according to 3 different categories. You have the cracks that don't matter; they're just a startup cracks and they will stay there. It doesn't matter. You have the middle one that you can still act on them, probably by just like spraying or refilling them, injecting. And then you have the ones that are dramatic. and those cracks need to be addressed in probably heavier machines. But of course, we are conscious that as we develop those artificial intelligence modules within the drone spray systems, we keep on discovering more and more aspects that where the artificial intelligence will really make a change and somehow as well give us very different forms of architecture by embedding such systems.
Interesting. Thank you for that, Stephanie. We have a question here to Claudia from Sarah Asif. Sarah, I'm going to read the whole thing. Sarah's saying, most of the projects designed by ecoLogicStudio blurs territorial boundaries between nature and man, as well as bacteria. Do you believe that after COVID crisis, architecture might benefit from this form of thinking, in a way psychologically shifting current Anthropocene society to a better collaborative society? I guess she means across species. Very interesting take on her understanding.
That's exactly what I was saying today. So the issue that emerged from the pandemic are due to the disrupted relationship we have at the moment with non-human form of life on the planet. And this is, in our opinion, also caused by the fact that our cities are designed in a totally anthropocentric manner. And that doesn't mean we don't need to design for human, or we don't need to host human in our city. But we need to take a non-anthropocentric perspective. So we need to acknowledge that our design needs to host what I call biocitizens for bacteria, animals, also foxes, birds, as well as artificial form of intelligence that will become more and more prominent. So this will allow, in my opinion, a different type of relationship to emerge between human and non-human form of life in the planet, and that for phenomena like the current pandemic, in that sense, less likely to happen. But if we don't change this approach, then yes, I guess the pandemic, from what we know and what we read on scientific paper as well as else, will keep happening. This is something, though, that I'm not sure is likely to happen, because the government and politics at the moment is going totally in the opposite direction. So I guess designers really have a role here in changing the way we conceive our city. And in the moment we are approached by a client to divert the brief or consult the client in the appropriate manner so that we are able to take a different approach. I think this is really something we can contribute to.
Very interesting. We have a question to Stephanie by Jumana, who's saying, with regards to the vertical walls in urban cities, how would they be irrigated, especially if cities were in, or if they were used in cities where water is scarce?
Yeah, thank you, Jumana, for the question. Actually, well, that's the whole point of what we are developing about not relying on heavy watering system. They need to be embedded in the vertical garden. It's what makes them quite expensive and limited in size. So what we are developing is to bring principles of precision agriculture into the vertical urban facade, in the sense that we would spray the right quantity of water or the right quantity of nutrients per pocket or per area, depending on which vegetal is growing there. So we are really considering the vegetal as, a proper construction material that has very, very specific requirements. And we are working with a gardener that is as well from Lille, it's called Un Jardin sur le Toit. And we are actually pre-growing all those species and observing the speed of their growth, their morphology, and how long they would die, their lifespan. So we're really listing about 50 of these parameters and monitoring them over time to be able to then place them into those 3D knit vertical gardens.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So it's more of a localized approach to irrigation and nutrients and so on. And maybe also AI could help with that, to identify growth and patterns of where you have that sort of locale to address the input to every plant and vegetable. Manuel Jimenez Garcia is asking a question, and I wish Manuel would actually turn on his video so we can see him again. He was with us on a panel a few days ago, but maybe he's, there he is. So, yeah, Manuel, are you in your pajamas? And that's why your video is off.
Yes, of course. I just went quickly and got a teaser.
Amazing. Maybe you can ask your question live to Stephanie. It's kind of a follow-up question to Jumana's question.
Thanks for the brilliant conversation. I think it was very inspiring. I was actually just, and also this is a question that kind of appeared in the previous debate, around the politics of automation and how we deal with the regulations and protocols. Right? So I'm going to read my own question here. Do you think we will start changing the way new materials and construction processes get through after COVID and can become reality? Will we be able to find a way to deal with the politics of automation and experimental manufacturing faster to give an immediate response to not only situations like this, but also to contribute to accelerate a better future?
Interesting. So that question was directed to Stephanie as a kind of follow-up to Jumana's question, or is it directed to both Stephanie and Claudia? Yeah.
It's to everyone. I'm generally very curious to see how these processes become kind of reality, right? Like how we can get through all the obstacles that we find sometimes in bureaucracy that we're all surrounded by, to really apply them to change our built environment beyond protocols.
This is the real challenge, really. I think no matter how advanced and how relevant and how beautiful are the technologies we are using, if they can be used in a normal construction site and embedded in the normal construction chain, obviously it won't work and we won't be able to develop them. Well, hopefully that the pandemic just brings a little bit more flexibility in this kind of thinking. I don't know how it is for robotics on site. I guess for prefabrication, there's no problem. But if you were to bring the robot on site, I'm not exactly sure how does it work. But for the drone, our challenge is really to pass the information that the drone spray as it is just like a new crane. There's no more danger to this because it's not going to fly anywhere. It's attached. It has like that umbilical cord. So we're really working with the authorities to make them understand that it's not more dangerous than a normal crane, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there needs also to be something that creates the necessity or the speculative need. Like, for example, we all thought we couldn't stop flying, and then we had to, and that things change all of a sudden. And I had a lot of problem working with algae in built environment, but all of a sudden climate change is a big issue. So all these problems were overtaken all of a sudden. So there needs also to be a way of discussing these and reaching out that make clear, I think, what innovation and design innovation can bring. In that moment, I think politics can be rewritten. Otherwise, I think if we try, I'm always for the bottom up, but in this case, if we try with policy to negotiate too much from the bottom up, I think it will be quite complicated. I think there needs to be something more impactful that relate to the urgency of making a change. If there is an urgency in making a change, then the design innovation can really start to have an impact. And in the moment we have changed the policy, then we can go from there. Unfortunately, I struggle to think that we can do this from the bottom up, like changing policies step by step. Although this is my preferred option usually, but yeah, in this case, I doubt it.
Yeah. From my experience working here in Dubai, and Dubai had launched this initiative a few years back to have a certain goal for 3D printing a certain number of buildings in the city, And as time panned out, it was very clear that a lot of work needs to be done, a lot of prototyping needs to be done to understand the technology very well, to understand its implications aside from its advantages on material savings and ecological footprint, etc., and to understand also the social behavior behind people who would be the end consumer. So through our journey here in Dubai, you've noticed that a lot of our clients that are approaching us are governments or big companies. Now, in a way, governments obviously are change makers, and they could implement new laws. And through working with them, you notice that there's a need to basically show proof of concept always, especially as a young company, to show that this work could be done and that there could be advantages from it with minimum friction. And, it's really difficult then, because the fight you're fighting is, and innovation is always a path that is not so straightforward. You have to experiment, you have to go back and forth, and you need enough time and you need enough budget. And all of these things are always the challenges and limitations. So while trying to address those issues that my colleagues here spoke about, which I agree very strongly with, we are trying to build a business, and we are trying to also, at the end of the day, have the client be satisfied with the product that we're offering out there. So, the short answer, I think, is in my head, is by building more and overcoming these challenges one by one, and eventually developing on the previous learnings from the previous experiment. And hopefully, as you grow these experiments, your impact would also grow. And eventually, maybe that impact would influence change makers to introduce new regulations and protocols that are in favor of innovation and that are in favor of positive change, and in favor of using these new ideas and new technologies to better our cities one way or another. Manuel, did you freeze, or are you thinking about my? I think it's pretty.
He's thinking very intensively about your answer.
That was very funny, and that's a good note to end on, because we have 3 more minutes before our time is up. Again, I'd like to thank Claudia Pasquero for her amazing contribution to this panel, as well as Stephanie Chaltiel joining from Barcelona. Thank you so much for your introspection and your insight into your world, to both of our panelists. And thanks to the attendees that joined us today from different places around the world. With your attendance, this conversation was enriched. Please join us again for semester 2, which is coming up soon. So please stay tuned for that. And as well as Live Academy TV, which is a new project that we're launching in a few days. Claudia and Stephanie, would you like to have any words before we leave you?
Thank you so much for the session.
Thanks. And this will be the ending of semester 1. So thanks again, and see you soon.